Here, 190 there. So, loading it.
Yeah, that I will. And I must take to toilet lunch break, and I will hand over to Cheryl to take us through the Three Waters portfolio.
Thank you. So we're up to item number 26.1.9 on page 50, the Three Waters Capital Projects Program status update. Patrick.
Cheryl, good afternoon. Happy New Year.
You
We've got, I'll take the report as read, but essentially we've got 6 reports there, 3 that we've got proper full status reports, another 3 which I've got sort of in the body of this document, and you'll get more fulsome reports on those in the next meeting that I attend in March. It's essentially we're not putting those out yet because they haven't started the execution phase of the work, which is where the real action happens and the spending and everything happens. So you'd be interested in seeing a report on something that's been designed over the course of a year. So yeah, the Alexandra water main renewals is tracking quite well. We've added some work into it to get a better outcome with the reservoir and rising falling main with the work there. So we're working through that with our contractors. The other key part of that work, I suppose, in terms of stakeholder side of it, is that we're off the roads completely. So there's no traffic management anymore. So we're quite happy about that. They're just working away in the background up the hill on Roach Hill. So that work's been ticking along okay. Cromwell water treatment grade is also ticking along. We're sort of looking at May finish at the moment, but we had to add a piece of work into that we alluded to at our last meeting to put in a bypass piece of work, because the main pipeline that goes up to the reservoirs is actually a rising and falling main. So we have to put a bypass in when we do all the commissioning work and do the cut-ins to that existing line, so that it's not live while we're cutting into it. So that's a fairly chunky piece of work that we've actually awarded to Fulton Hogan as a separate piece of work that fits into the overall program, and it gives a much better overall outcome for the project. The work down by the lakefront is progressing. We hope to start getting a few more building materials around, which I know, Cheryl, you raised last time. So we should get the cages around them and the cladding on it and the roof sort of March, April. So they won't look as
Prison life.
some people think they look like.
Looks like a gas chamber bunker, doesn't it? The kids would know it's good.
So yeah, it's progressing well. And the other one's Ranfurly and Patearoa water treatment plant upgrades. Patearoa is away racing now, so that's all fully functioning. Ranfurly has been commissioned, and that's in its proving period at the moment, but that is functioning with a UV barrier and so forth. So the Ranfurly plant has probably been a bit more challenging because we've had some heavy rainfall events, but it's actually quite good to test it all while you have a difficult situation. So it seems to be coming through. Yeah. The other 3 that I haven't got full reports on are pretty much as read. Glasgow contractors have established a site at Ranfurly, so they're getting ready to commence desludging of the ponds very, very soon. We had a site meeting with South Roads up at Bannockburn today, so they're going to land quite on site in about 3 weeks, and in the next few weeks now just do some underground investigations, make sure they know where everything is before they start digging stuff up. And the Dunstan Road water and wastewater reticulation, we awarded that to Fulton Hogan just today. We sent the official letter today. And one heartening thing with that tender is they were the highest non-price attributes and the lowest price tenders. So that's usually turns out a pretty good outcome to the council. So pleased with that.
Because they can all walk to site instead of having to drive.
Well, they have some advantages, yes.
Credits.
That's a good result.
It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah. And they put in a pretty good methodology in that, so we're quite comfortable and pleased with how we think they'll progress through the work.
Excellent.
That one, the developers are quite interested in for that large residential zone. So the current program that Paul Hogan's given us is to have it all completed by May this year. So I think we should be ahead of the developers here, which is always a good thing.
I'd love an Omicale update.
Which one, water or wastewater?
Both. Be the whole lot.
For the wastewater treatment plant, we've done 2 investigation sites for feasibility for RIBS, which is the treated wastewater into the ground, dissipating into the ground. The site up above the Matak rugby club rooms wasn't good, didn't turn out well. We went to another site, which is between the highway and the rail trail, way out of town towards the stockyards there. And we've got a report back that the infiltration wasn't good there either. What's also a critical part of that is that on the 19th of December, the new National Wastewater Standards were ratified. So now we're going to do some more work with Becker, our consultants, to look at what options we could do with what we've got now and what will adhere to the wastewater standards. So there's a lot of work happening in the background. There's still a lot of sampling happening to understand the influent and effluent discharges and so forth. So a lot of work happening. But like I've said before, it can take a while till the real physical work happens. But we hope to have some concept understanding, and we'll bring that to you in a report at some stage this year.
So from 12th of December, what changed?
19th of December,
Yeah.
the new wastewater standards were ratified.
They came into force then.
Yeah.
We knew they were coming, though, didn't we?
We did, yeah.
But until then,
Yeah.
there could have been something to change. But it means that we can continue to discharge treated waste into the river, a river body or a water body of some description, with just differing standards when we put it into.
Is that why that, was it cool?
So we may have no need to do anything other than just protect
Yeah.
this existing site.
This existing site is in the floodplain.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say.
And the river's a low flow river. There's lots of different elements that need to be
One would
considered.
argue that if the LRC had shifted the gravel in the appropriate part of the river, it would be a deeper river.
No, we're not getting into that, Stu.
And the other thing is, I was watching this stuff in Holland where they had some cages, a bit like what happened in last flood, but they were metre rock cages around their system, so the flood allowed water to go through. It's like a game in basket, and I thought, well, that would work at Omicale water because it would be given a metre. If you went over a metre, nothing's going to survive.
Yeah. And that's the whole point of doing an options assessment, I suppose, so we can show you that we've done our due diligence and look at the options.
I've been studying some of that stuff in my
Make
time
sure that
off.
we adhere to the standards that are there.
Yes, the reason why I was asking, and then obviously the drinking water in Omicale. Tamer and I have certainly had multiple people asking us about the drinking water. I know Julie's had people looking to her as well, so.
Kerry's here, but Julie and Kerry have been working with Stantec on some background. And once again, at Omicale, we've been doing a lot of sampling to understand the water properties and what happens there over the course of a year. So we're hoping to get a project brief for Omicale water in the next month or two to get that going, because there's a possibility, I think, of moving the temporary UV plant from Ranfurly to Omicale as a stopgap between the full design and implementation of a new scheme there.
The questions.
Just lots, but not for today.
Yeah, just a very quick question. I've been asked a few times, after the work's completed at Cromwell, will there be so much lime in the timescale in the matter? At all?
Yes,
There will still be some,
Yeah,
and they meet the minimum aesthetic values, the current source. But what we do know is the source up on the terrace has higher line than the source below beside the lake. So the dominant bore we're going to make it down by the lake, so that when we go down to less lake during winter, the dominant bore will be the lower line, but there will still be line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you say that because I've been there for an awful long time and water cylinders don't seem to last, seem to gather more lime now than what they did historically.
That's what I'm saying. The dominant bore was the one on the terrace, which has higher lime content.
Yeah, I understand.
The questions? Okay, the recommendation is that the report be received and its contents noted. Do I have a mover? Ju and Tamar, thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. So now we're on to item number 26.1.10, page 54, January wastewater status update.
Good.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. I'll take the report as read. Another fairly brief update this month. The two remaining abatement notices at Ranfurly and Roxburgh wastewater treatment plants have current compliance dates of the 30th of June 26 for Ranfurly and the 30th of April 26 for Roxburgh. The completed work at Roxburgh with the desludging in 2024 and the aeration going in 25 is showing positive results with our nitrogen limits. Our nitrogen limits have been consistently compliant since August 2025. This is significant because it's the first time we've seen consistent compliance with the individual limits since 2017. But we do remain non-compliant with our 24-month GR mean limit. It's unlikely that we're going to achieve compliance with that GR mean by the current date of April 26, and we will have to apply for a further extension on the abatement notice. Ranfurly, as Petra mentioned, we're starting the desludging of the wetlands and the ponds in February. The treatment plant has been producing compliant effluent since July of 2024. But while the effluent discharge is compliant, we do still have our downstream results in relation to the upstream are still showing higher, not exceedances, but higher limits. I mean, it is going to be difficult to achieve compliance with that condition, given the very, very low flows in the creek upstream. So essentially what we're sampling downstream is quite often solely our effluent discharge. We are looking at options for changing to a land disposal to move away from that creek and make it more feasible. The national standards came into law on, like Patrick said, the 19th of December, and the standard introduces consistent monitoring and reporting requirements for treatment, as well as overflow and bypass consents and stormwater and wastewater risk management plans. Although the standards don't immediately have an impact on our day-to-day operations, staff are progressing with risk management assessments, and that technical review of all of our sites is being undertaken. The end of 2025, ORC did carry out our drinking water consent audit. We're expecting to get those reports by the end of this month, and we'll provide a report to council once we've got that. Any questions?
That Ranfurly wastewater plant, it would just about be as easy to get rid of to land because there's no creek there. There's no water there.
Very often, no, there's hardly any water there.
So do the regional council not see that as a part of, well, we actually got it basically is to land?
It is still a creek by definition, so it is still a discharge to water. But yeah, there is work.
So can we not change the definition?
So we can apply for a new consent and change the way that we are discharging, but we couldn't continue discharging the way we are under our existing consent.
You mean change and have it not a desert anymore if there's no water in it?
If it's a depression in the ground, which it pretty much is, it's not a creek because there's no waterway there. It's,
It's a creek, not a creek. It's not a joke.
When is the wetland line?
it's got a depression, so it's not running. It isn't a water source. The water doesn't run down through there on top of the ground. It's a terminology built and brought along by someone else.
There is, and it is, you do have to look hard for the flow upstream, but there is low upstream side. And so that is part of what makes it a discharge to water.
Yeah, you're talking about nothing. But, or in saying that, if you turned around and put it to land just beside it, it would be to land. But you'd have to have a whole new consent process to go to land.
We are doing a wee bit of optioneering at the
Yeah.
moment, just to see.
The other
what
option is to turn the top of the creek into the wastewater plant for a start. We're dealing with nothing, but yet it's making this non-abatement notice over nothing. It makes the council staff or council look like we're breaching all our obligations. But the actual physical part of that ground is not a waterway. So it makes it tough on staff because that's
Well, it
what
does, yes.
It's not us you have to convince, it's the regional council.
So discharge to the land is one
We'll have to
option.
have another discussion before they disband it.
So now that we've got the new standards out that Patrick, oh, sorry, I'll quickly introduce myself, Andrew Watson, Operations Manager for Three Waters. Nice to meet you all. So yeah, as Patrick said, new standards come out. It means that we can confidently look at our options rather than trying to do a whole lot of work that might never come to fruition. So it's a really good opportunity for us to relook at our options and like present what we recommend.
There was an initial review done when the standards were out for consultation. And with the existing discharge, with it designated as a discharge to water, we wouldn't actually meet the standards because the dilution in that waterway would be too low.
That's his. Yeah,
That's my point.
Yeah.
It's never, so you either go to land or we took water into it to let it dilute. Actually, to put more through the system.
Treat.
Oh, well, that's a mockery they're making of the staff, isn't it? Because you haven't got a creek and it is to water. There's not enough water to be a measurable waterway. If you ask Neil or someone to measure how much water is in that catchment there, they wouldn't be able to measure it with any other
Creek,
measuring
not
system.
catchment.
Well, creek. So there's not, they wouldn't be able, if you put measuring site there, you wouldn't be able to measure enough water to make it a debate. But yet we've got to play by compliance, driven by someone else, and you're never going to get a solution to it.
That's an X creek.
So it's nothing. It's just a divot in the ground.
I'm gonna be there.
Here for
The
lunch.
Omacao change in date, is that because of the standards? Yeah, okay. And then my next question is, you got me on my train of thought now.
Just my attention.
The graphs that you've got there, the two figures. When I initially looked at this, I thought, oh, that looks really good. And it is good that it's trending down. Two graphs don't have any of the same kind of data. One's over an incredibly long period of time and the other's over several months to a year. So is that because of the desludging and the aeration, is that now being measured on a monthly basis or?
Yeah, so for the Roxburgh consent, we only have to buy the consent sample twice a year in February and August. But when we started doing this work with the desludging and the aeration, we started doing monthly samples just so we could see how we're tracking and get an understanding of if the work we've done is seeing an improvement. So we are sampling more frequently at the moment.
So with the spikes, you must know what spikes are from then.
In the first graph,
Second graph.
the second graph. So we, in general, the treatment plant for nitrogen actually treats quite well during the summer months, but we've always had an issue in winter when it gets cold, and that's when the pond would struggle to treat nitrogen. And so those couple of spikes, apart from that one in December, January, 24-25,
Yeah.
the spikes do line up with the winter months when we normally see lower treatment.
So that'll be partially due to just natural temperatures and all that.
That's right.
So it's really nice to see the peaks that that second peak on the second graph would normally be up to that same level. So it's actually nice to see the progression. And then so we got up how we operate the plants moving forward as well. We might be able to get a wee bit more of that aeration. And just talking a bit more about it today, it might be that we look at adding some more aeration if we think that's going to be the best thing. Again, we have to try something, see if it works. We had a really good inclination that this was going to provide us with the sort of result that we're seeing. So it's just maybe we need to go that extra step now.
Dairy farmers have been doing it for years, aeration, so it clearly works and it's suitable for the ORC for dairy farmers, so it would make sense that it's great to see the downward trend.
You just look to get an extension through to August when that spike test drops out of the calculation.
I was having a look at the numbers just recently because it's a 24-month.
Yeah.
And at the moment, because our individual limit is 35 milligrams a litre, but our geomean is 25 milligrams a litre. And so at the moment, we're sitting around that 27, 28 milligrams a litre. And so we're still, depending how we go, and this is what we're looking like, whether we need to do additional steps, it still might take us a while to get into that 25.
So in April, when you need to go and get an extension, how far out are you going to ask for?
So in the last couple of times when we've requested extensions, we have asked initially for a 2-year extension. ORC at this stage have, and they gave us a 1-year extension last time. At this stage, they seem to only be giving 1-year extensions and then asking us to come back each 12 months.
Suppose they can give a 2-year extension.
So can I just clarify, you've got to have 2 years then of compliant before they'll actually lift any form of abatement or anything like that. So it's got to be two whole.
So that geomean is a 24-month geomean.
Oh, it is 24.
Yeah, and
Okay.
it's that 25 milligrams, so it's kind of another.
So it's got to be consistent for that whole 2 year.
What's the cost of an abatement notice? Wasn't me, other than just a breach.
We have to do accelerated work programs, you know.
So you're potentially talking about 1 milligram per litre of nitrate in the water. Breach your abatement notice. So am I right?
No, great. So that's obviously the main. So if we are peaking over it in the winter months, then we need to potentially come down quite a bit, and we need to have that over the 2-year period.
The peaking problem is about nature and the temperatures or how the nitrate breaks down.
Yeah, so we need to address that. So if we're still sitting above our geomean at the moment, it could be that we need to put in another aerator and then bring the average down during the better months so that the geomean equalizes out below that 25. And when we actually installed the new aerator recently, we put in provision another conduit to be able to get power to another aerator without a massive, doing everything again. So we've already kind of prepared to be able to do that.
So
And the evidence to suggest that we need to do it now.
you work harder to treat the peak and leave the rest alone. Like if the peak is there and you have to put more air into it for 1 or 2 months of the year, you could turn it off after the rest of the year, you're still under your average. Or is the cost of treating?
It could be something like that. That would be us kind of taking into consideration the power expense it is to keep the aerator. So yeah, it's certainly something our operations team will look at making more efficient once we can make sure that we actually get below that geomean. But yeah, certainly that's the efficiencies.
And I guess going back to the question about the Omakau wastewater plant, the regional council has taken a lot of the trees out of these rivers now over time, that the flow will change. It may not necessarily become a flood-prone river. And is that when you go to the consultant, Becca, or wherever you're going to get that done, do those things come into their decision making? Because if more water or more minimum flow or more trees out, it means more water running down the river. That will make a massive difference to your dilution rates of the Omakau plant.
Given just what's happened up north, I think they would, the flooding and things that's happened up there, I think we have to take a really proactive stance on Omakau wastewater. It's got to be something, I mean, look, it might be fit for purpose now, but if something, when we're not around, when, we're 30 years down the track, it's, it needs to be, it's something that we need to look at properly. And yes, it's can be expensive, but
With the new standards though,
Yeah.
the way the law's been written is just have to meet the minimum standard. Whereas in the past, it was, you have to, because we've looked at a number of sorts of investments you could do, which is quite expensive. But put out the standards, you just have to meet the minimum standard for that wastewater treatment plant. Now that could be still to land, but it's the minimum standard it meets, so they've given us a range of options. Team will go away, work it out.
More questions? Okay, the recommendation is that the report be received. Do I have a mover and a seconder?
However,
Yeah.
if you were out, Ramfleet, looking at that with the OIC, I'd love to be invited to come along. Thank you.
Think you won't be a question. Carried. Think of it all.
Just caring from a patch.
we're one big pitch.
Christmas holidays, while everybody else was busy holidaying and eating cake, Alex has been very busy preparing submissions for a number of key pieces of proposed legislature coming out. So welcome Alex and Saskia to take us through this next item.
Thank you and welcome back. And hello to my daughter who's so bored she's decided to watch council today.
That is a whole new level of 2 longer school holidays.
Isn't it? We've got 5 submissions to either share with you some key points or give you an update on in the next hour. And we're looking for confirmation that's the submission you'd like to take and confirmation on the direction. Saskia and I are going to take you through earthquake prone buildings and simplifying local government. In Julie's absence, Quentin's going to give you a very brief update on development levies and then has graciously given Paul and I some of his time. Paul's going to cover rates capping and Anne and Fee have the planning and natural environment bill. So we'll start with earthquake prone buildings because it's the fastest. And I'm loading up the presentation. You can just jump straight into the next slide. We've only got a single slide on earthquake prone buildings. So the Building Amendment Earthquake Prone Buildings Act closes in February. And the submission has pretty much entirely been drawn from the November 2025 meeting. You might recall we discussed that there is currently between $10 and $11 million worth of remediation budgeted towards our earthquake prone buildings, largely due to their heritage age and status and the existing legislation's need for them to comply with the new building standard. And we would like to submit, or we've suggested submitting, pointing that out, pointing about the potential cost savings and saying we support this move and support the risk-based approach. That submission is ready to go and will be circulated to you all shortly. So that's the update on that one. Unless anyone has comments on it, we'll jump straight into the big one for me, which is simplifying local government and our submission on that. This is due in late February and Saskia and I are taking the lead on putting your thoughts together on this one. Into the next slide, Wayne. The bill has 2 key proposals. The first is that we say goodbye to Neil and goodbye to the other councillor laws, and we replace them on a temporary basis with a combined territories board made up of mayors. This is what AI thinks a stick figure mayor looks like. So those 5 mayors would make up the new combined territories board. The regional council would remain. As in the staff through that transition. There would be a review by the government to determine which functions could be returned to central control, but we would only lose the governors there. And on to the next slide. That combined territories board would come up with a locally led reorganisation plan within 2 years. The Crown Commissioner. The Crown Commissioner is giant there because it's just so undetermined in this consultation if his role would be giant or minor. He could replace the Combined Territories Board entirely, or he could just have an observer role with that board. But either way, the Minister for Local Government would need to sign off on the locally led reorganisation plan. And as Tamer pointed out,
the same thing.
You could be a she.
or she, it's the second time I've done that.
Let's go down.
They. My assumption, because I'm seeing them as a bad guy right now.
Oh, it's definitely a bloke then.
And on to the next slide, Wayne. And these are the criteria which they would use to make that decision. So they are looking for a big picture fit that's affordable now and into the future. Better services, clear leadership, local say, how it fits with treaty arrangements, and can it be done? And the next slide is the specific feedback they've asked for from us, which is the role of the Crown Commissioner, what the voting arrangement would be, our overall support, and what we think of the criteria. So we've been here before. Next slide, Wayne. We submitted to the Future for Local Government review a couple of years ago, and that review ended with 16 recommendations. A few of those recommendations are not dissimilar to some of this work. So that Combined Territories Board is really similar to the Combined Network model structure, or what we referred to as the Manchester model or the Mayor of Mayors. What is missing from it is the other 15 recommendations, and there are some pretty major ones in there. The big standout for me is the funding and financing arrangements, which we've known since 2009 were very, very broken and unsustainable. And the Future for Local Government report itself ended in saying that each of those 16 recommendations must work with each other. If we don't do all of them, we risk getting it quite wrong. The other big challenge for us, next slide, Wayne, is the voting model. There's two options in the report. This is option A. Under that option, each of the 5 mayors in Otago would have one vote. What that means practically in the Otago sense is that if Tamer were to line up with Waitaki and Clutha, they would have a majority at 27% of the population, or 66,000 people, to the 176,000 people in Queenstown or Dunedin. So that one is seen as quite unfair and would obviously not be favoured by either Dunedin or QLDC.
Might make it work though.
It might, but wait until you see option B. Under option B, we share 10% of the vote. So we either have a vast majority or 3% say. Under option B, Dunedin have the population to consistently have a majority or 70% of the vote, which means every decision would go in favour of the Dunedin Mayor's position. This would be a transitory model for 2 years, but it wouldn't set us up for the best result to be in that situation. Slide. And this is
So there's no option C.
There's no option C. We could develop an option C. At this stage, I've got that option A and option B are both desperately unworkable for us. As Tamer put it, neither would give us the best outcome for this community. This slide is to represent that up to the government. Working together is a good idea. That's why we do. And this is just a summary of some of the things we already do together. So we've both the Mayoral and Chief Executive Forum. We have our executive teams having shared away days. Te Raupotai Otago, where we consult with iwi together. There's joint committees across regional transport, emergency management and regional deals. We have councillor working groups. Anne Clinton and I and a few of our teams sit on quite a few staff working groups, and there is a giant tourism partnership that expands beyond just the Otago borders as well. And as you'll see on the very next slide, our waters borders are not sitting in the Otago area either. Noting that Waitaki partially sits in Canterbury and we're unsure what they're doing, both QLDC and Dunedin are going alone for waters, and we have Gore coming in. So it is an option of considering Gore as part of a future model, and that is something we'd need to consider quite carefully into the future. On the next two slides, I've just put a list of our other critiques that we want to list out. I'm just going to run through them very quickly with you. So the first is there is a concern about the level of accountability for an unelected Crown Commissioner. I think that has to be quite front and centre, that we're a very responsive council to our community, and there is quite a level of discomfort of bringing in an outside observer with potentially that level of authority and no accountability. The second one is a point Peter made very well, and that is the tyranny of distance in an area of this size, and trying to get someone all the way across the Motu from Queenstown to Dunedin. It's just too far, and it's a real burden. That's one I found quite problematic in Auckland after the amalgamation, is that getting the members from Pukekohe and the members from Kaipara an hour and a half into the city centre was just a barrier for access to democracy that the rest of the city didn't have, that all of our people were there. The community boards there came out of a conversation with Tamo. She emphasised that if this were to go ahead in any form, the role of those boards would become really crucial. That would be where all of our localism sat, and to really emphasise that. And in the bottom right quadrant, that is representing both the lack of environmental issues in this report, that there is no clear way of funding the climate initiatives and concerns we know are coming. We can look at the expenses over the weekend. And there is a concern that us amalgamating as a larger Otago would open up our ratepayers to a higher level of climate risk funding and financing than they currently have. We don't have a coastline. We don't have the level of inundation of areas like Glenorchy. We would be looking at higher levels of climate remediation as a joint Otago than we do as Central Otago, who is more sheltered. Next slide, one. The workload for the mayors themselves would be outrageous and probably could not be done without having additional staff, probably at the level of expense we're saving by losing the ORC councillors. The partnership with central government is one of those gaps from the Future for Local Government report that we've identified as really crucial for our future. The bottom left slide is to represent that there is no consideration in this report of other functions that local government could do, but there are a range of them. There's a lot in the social sector space. There's a lot of overlap in administrative control of land that we, LINZ and DOC will do that we could look at. Inshore fisheries is a bit of a gap. Healthcare, education, policing, they're all areas that we could consider if we were looking at this holistically. And part of the recommendation could be that we slow down and do it. And then the final slide, the show me the money, is we have not been able to find where these cost savings would come from in this proposal. In fact, the Tai Tuara submission says there are considerable transitional costs that aren't accounted for or budgeted in any way. So all of that is in this draft submission, and this slide is really showing we'll take all of your feedback. We have been working with the strategy managers group from the other Otago councils on getting some of their points, and thanks to QRDC for giving us some of these notes. We have the submission from Tai Tuara and from Economic Development New Zealand, and there's a lot of consistency across that. And then that bottom corner, it's just referring back to the Productivity Commission inquiry that really clearly shows where the funding and financing arrangements for local government and those challenges are coming from that have just not been addressed through this piece of legislation. And we really need to go back and address them, particularly in the space for climate adaptation. It is a noted risk on all of our documents. And as one final point there as well, the transition arrangement would align with our next local government election. So as Tamer pointed out to me, the political timing of this one just feels not the most responsible or best way to do it. So in summary, I'm hoping to pull all of that together and say, we do support reformation of local government. It's necessary. We've said that all along. We need to slow down and get it right before we throw it all at the wrong direction. Is there anything I've missed or any other feedback?
We haven't provided any solutions, though. Yeah.
We haven't yet. I do think that there is a solution in that locally led decision making coming between those mayors. Tai Tuara have offered a couple as well. They've offered changes to some of the wording of the criteria and their own criteria and purpose. And looking at those other functions would be the other thing.
And I guess part problem I've got with that, it's been driven by staff. We should have a workshop, say how the elected members in our communities want to take all these issues forward.
That is what this is.
Yeah.
That's as far as I could get without you here. So this is me getting that feedback from you. We don't have time to take it to the community because it's a truncated consultation, but anything you don't want in there won't be in there. That's me taking a guess at what you might say based on what you've already said to me.
So to shape up thinking for today, we had initial conversation with Tamer just to make sure we weren't shooting off completely in the wrong direction. And then the idea is to come back to this table and to get the thoughts, and then we will circulate the submission. So you will get the written submission,
Yeah.
which you can provide further feedback and on, and we'll work with Tamer, given we won't have another council meeting before
Like this bill is trying to tackle the problem, it's trying to tidy up the lowest common denominator with councils around the country that are sloppy with how they operate, how they spend public money, right? Fortunately, or unfortunately, I would consider we're not one of them, but we're pretty good custodians of the ratepayers' money, and it's a reasonably well-run organisation, credit to all years. So how do we advocate for us and saying, hey, yeah, we see the problem you're trying to address in some organisations, but we're actually very capable and competent of doing a lot of this ourselves.
It's basically what we'll say through the submission.
Yeah.
And the rest of it is up to Tamer and how you guys choose to influence that regional leadership.
But can you take specifics from this organisation and go, and I don't know, you probably can't compare them to others, but say, hey, look.
You can, and
Yeah.
I think the best example is probably Wellington. So as I read up on this and started pulling it together, there was some discussion in the Kapiti Council about how a unitary authority might work and it might be a good direction. This might be the right push. But it doesn't feel like a piece of legislation that's fully considered the impact on a council like ours. It has urban and rural in the same place.
That's right.
And that is really what we need to reflect back, that special consideration needs to be given to an area like Otago. There's different needs than a big metro centre.
But
But to Stu's point,
when they amalgamated 25 years ago, the small communities didn't want to amalgamate with Central Otago District Council.
When we
Grandfather's
say
father.
urban,
Huh?
when we say urban, it's not that urban.
No.
We don't have any city populations, transport. We do have this time around, which I think puts us in really good stead, as a group of Otago mayors at a mayoral level who are all really collegiate and open to working together and coming up with an excellent idea, recognising that each of our councils will put in a submission in the interim. But I think probably our trump card at the moment is our really strong community boards, because if there were to be any sort of amalgamation
That'd be
or
gone.
we would need to keep them. And if anything,
No,
if we were going to merge with anyone else or amalgamate other functions, then retaining those community boards would be really important. And the thing that we have is a community board for every resident. And not all of the councils have those. Some of
That's
them have
actually-
community boards, but they don't cover the whole area.
That's what they want to get rid of, though. That's what's going to happen by default.
Not
Because,
necessarily.
well, yeah, but we've got to be realistic about that. You look at the numbers on the two big towns either side. I was talking to Neil Gillespie about this the other day. My option we should be looking at, and I've said this in the last mandate crew we had with Sanchi and Tim, is we should be amalgamating with the Waitaki. And Queenstown and Dunedin stay independent. Now, how the shares work and the voting rights, because when you have got, like you had up there, the customs and immigration, work and income, they are entities outside of our catchment, outside of our basket.
they're also not entities I put in there because they're very different to us, those.
Yeah,
groups.
but I mean, what I'm saying is that they're not our lane at the moment. We're not playing in that game. But if we're going to go to any form with the regional council being disbanded, it has to be disbanded evenly. And effectively we'll be finished.
If I can channel your thoughts quite carefully, because I have to have a draft due on this next week. Something that stood out really keenly, you said during the last Future for Local Government review, was you wouldn't set up a board of this size. It doesn't have the finances to sustain. And we've really carried that message through. Is the community boards the key sticking point in the other functions, or are there other areas you'd like us to change?
Yeah, look at it in its entirety. I think the community boards disappear. And I think the elected members, you have a different representation from those communities.
That would really be the area we're talking about now, is what the combined territories model would do. So would your preferred focus for us be to ensure we have a sufficient voice in that process?
Well, I just think we don't know how they're going to throw it at us. I've got rid of the regional council and said, you're going to take some management over that.
Yeah.
Well, it was a curveball we never saw coming as quick as it did. We thought it might have been a process. We could accumulate the staff of the regional councils and places through their region. Probably one of the biggest problems the regional councils have been doing. The majority of their work is at Central Otago, they live in Dunedin. And the environmental role, the government took over part of the environmental role, and we took over part of the water capture role or the capture board, and they haven't told us what they're going to start up. But if you got rid of the community boards, it's how the voting is going to go. And my argument, if you want to get rid of the community boards, then you have 2 people from Community Care, the old voting we had, 3 people from the Minnetonka, 2 from the Teviot, 5 from Wanaka, and they'd become the overall board. Because they actually want to shrink down the amount of everything.
They might want it, but we have to come with what is the best for our people. What is best for the people is when they know someone that they can line up at the Wedderburn Tavern on a Friday afternoon to say, we're not happy with what's happening here.
Yeah.
And if you remove that opportunity, I do think that the best way that our community can have a say is to retain local representation at a community board level.
And then the government will say, what's changed?
The government, the minister is looking for a viable option for into the future that says how the regional council functions would be delivered at a local level. And we get to help say what that might look like. That might be, we want to be a unitary council that retains the Central Otago District Council boundaries. We could ask for that, recognising that Tasman, which is a unitary council, not Tasman, Marlborough, because I spoke to Nadine Taylor, they are a unitary council, and she reckons that they are the smallest viable option for a unitary, and they are twice the size of us.
Yeah,
So we need to think about what it would look like. And one of the things that I would like to see in here is the ability for us to redraw what our boundaries look like.
Absolutely.
Because we have brought in a council to our water CCO that is not in our region. And that might become a problem down the track. So maybe do we want to see something in there around redrawing boundaries? Because it might be that Waitaki's boundary with us changes in some way, shape or form, or our boundary with Queenstown or whatever it be. So I think it's important that we have the ability to relook at boundaries. The other thing I'd really like to steer on is the voting thing, because neither of them are necessarily a great option for us unless you went with one council, one vote. And that would require a huge amount of trust from the big players, which is Dunedin City and Queenstown Lakes, to say, well, what are we wanting to achieve that is in the best interests of all people of Otago? And I think you've got people in their mayoral roles who would be able to carry out that function, but we would have to be committed to all working together. But we've already said that that's the option that we want with our water CCO.
Yeah, and that worked.
Has worked.
Well,
That's what we're
but we haven't got Queenstown with us, or we haven't gone with their 2 neighbours. Our neighbours either side of us are going with us because we're more like for like. And my proposal to I was talking to Neil that the other day, is let those 2 big entities be their own.
But they might not want to be.
The government's going to tell them they're going to have to be.
No, that's the whole point, is we're saying, we think this is the idea. And if we come up with a good idea, the minister will sign off on it. And that's the big challenge for our community, is that if the CTB, whoever is on it, whether it be the mayors or a Crown Commissioner or whatever it is, if they say to the minister, here's the plan for Otago, the people of Otago don't get to say, oh, we don't really like that plan. If the minister thinks it looks good, this legislation proposes that the minister can sign it off.
Oh, be imposed.
So it would be imposed, which is why I think it is critical that people that our communities have elected are having a say in what it might look like, and that it doesn't all fall to a commissioner who may or may not live in Otago.
So in relation to your question about one mayor, one vote, if you think about, there's a lot of other factors that you could argue for one mayor, one vote, and that is, you look at the size of the district.
Yeah, I was going to say.
You look,
kilometres.
That's quite significant. And you know what? If the people actually vote somebody into that position of mayor, that is the population telling government, whoever you want to, that is the people saying, we trust those people, that person there to make that decision. Rightly or wrongly, that's not up for debate at the moment, but what it is that those people have got to do that job. Just like when we take an oath to do the best for our district, yes, we all come from different wards, but we actually have to make decisions for the district.
You're saying the seat.
Different,
Yeah.
if you have a conglomerate of
That's right.
mayors,
Yeah.
they have to make a decision for a region.
Yeah.
It's in my mind, there is no difference.
So it's one mayor, one vote.
Yep, so essentially, if it is all the mayors,
Yep.
well, when you make your decision to elect your mayor, you are not just making it for that, you're making it for a bigger picture.
Yep.
So it becomes a more important election, I guess, decision, because you're actually doing one vote to run your local council, your district council, and your regional environmental side. That's my.
In the perfect world, that would work.
But it does work. It works right now because, you know, excluding the regional council with the potential changes. But right now, mayor is elected by the people to do the job.
I guess for some though, so like some boards will say that they use the term consensus, like you could say for really significant decisions, there has to be 100%. Because then that means you'll have to get consensus to make the decision. So you could build those sorts of things into the governance structure. Otherwise, if you get a rogue mayor from a particular large population, and there's every chance of that going forward, because this is going to be here for the next 30 years. So I think there's some things that you could build into the legislation that enables those big decisions to be unanimous. So that way, if someone doesn't vote for it, then you have to come back around the table to determine that. So I think we can, there's things that overcome that, because on face value, there is a risk.
I mean, even if you look at Inland Otago numbers, if you include Queenstown, there's Dunedin and there's Inland Otago. I mean,
But the water has been roughly a navigational tool to what we've been trying to achieve through water. The only issue we've got is that maybe, or if it went somewhere else, or, you know, like that's nearly right with the water thinking, the Waitaki, maybe Timaru, but Inland Otago. My thing is that the cities are an authority on their own because the dynamics are different.
And there may well be, the answer could be, there's Dunedin City and Queenstown City, and then there's something in the coast and something inland. And that's the thing, all the options are open.
Yeah. And if you had a commissioner type, say, chief executive role of appointed by the councils, but like we've done with the water entity, some really talented people are in those roles. We sat over top of that and go, actually, we've got to come back around the table and get this right. Then one mayor, one vote would work.
You have an independent chair. As simple as that. You have all the mayors, one independent chair, and that independent chair sits just like a normal board where that person doesn't have a say on, you know, the mayor's vote, but the independent chair is the one who actually manages that situation.
I think the key point here is there's that much nuance in this, and 2 years is not a lot of time. So really emphasizing that. I think I have from you what I need to get this together, but I need to check with you that you are comfortable that having it to you by the 6th of February is enough time for you to feel like you own it rather than being staff led, or do you want to check in more often?
So is that for us to read it by the, you'll have it to us for reading?
Have it to you by the 6th of February. It's due on the 20th, so that gives you 2 weeks to get feedback.
Does it give you enough time to?
I'm a very fast writer, so.
This is a real priority for us, and I think to have it come to us on the 6th of February within 1 week time limit for us to actually provide feedback to you, so that if substantial changes are required, there is time to put that into. This is going to require homework for us outside of this meeting.
And we are reading, you know, because we have received the draft LG&Z submissions and the Thai tourist submission on these. So we're sort of informing ourselves on those sorts of things. There's a lot of consistency.
I can circulate you those if you'd like.
Don't have enough reading by the sounds of it.
So we sort of agree in that one vote, one year, one vote. There's the other options.
I think so, and then
The
you
other
have
option's
some
not tenable.
clauses, consensus or supermajority or whatever that looks like, but I think if you do it on a population basis, it is just such a perverse outcome.
And I'll write the community board portion either way, so you can decide together which one goes in.
Well, I just think that if they really wanted to look at thinning down the system by default, and I don't want to, that community boards will come under pressure. It may be that they become more of a shape.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but you could have more people that elected 2 from the Vincent or 4 from, you know, it used to be the Manuheric Care Ward. Well, when you turn to Manuheric Care, could have 3 elected. Well, I mean, that may be what falls out of it. And that's what I'm saying, because at the moment it works fine. I love community boards, they're doing a great job, but they haven't got a lot of authority over the decision making. But if we had 2 more people here, and Cromwell had 1 more, and Vincent had 1 more, and Teviot had 1, you'd have a fair representation from your community as well.
So just something's just jumped in my head about the representation, because obviously we went through the representation review, which is once every 6 years at one correct. And how does will that tie into, are you allowed to do the representation review as part of this process? Or is that-
Actually, you can do a representation review prior to 6 years. It is the latest time within the legislation that you can do it. So yes, we could, depending on where this will go, what it was, we could go down the process earlier.
We've got a central government election in between.
Yeah.
So, and this bill is designed that the first reading will be before the election and then any passing would be after. So it could change entirely like it has multiple times already. Thank you very much. So I believe Paul is next.
Yeah, you can sit there, it's asking you to take some of this.
I can't.
Thank you, council. Apologise for the delays in getting this to you. We got it, I think yesterday was when you got it. We had some logistical issues last week. So, yeah. I've just got a couple of points before I kind of open it up to questions. This is almost a submission when you're not having a submission, because there's really no legislation to submit on yet. What the DIA have asked for is we've kind of got this idea. It's really a classic case of building the plane while they're trying to fly it. So they've got this idea, and they're asking us for comments on the concept that they're trying to put in front of councils, rather than here's the wording of the legislation that you can pick apart. It was targeted. It came out late last year. It was targeted to I think LGNZ and Sulgum or Tatura at the time. They since then have opened it up to all councils. And there's a couple of points in there I'd really like to talk about. If you've read the submission and read the background documentation, they present a formula that's not actually a formula. I did actually try and calculate it out, and I came out that we could increase our rates by 400,000%, based on what they said was their formula. So that kind of didn't work for us. They've asked us mainly about the formula around the rates capping proposal. We've deviated a little bit from that. We have generally commented on it. We've used a little bit of Taitura's initial thoughts pre-Christmas, but we've also incorporated some of our own ideas that probably might be a little bit premature in terms of seeing what the legislation looks like to make proper comment. The legislation will be introduced in 2026, so this current year. It's probably may not get, I don't think they're aiming to get it passed by the election, but it's going to come into force whenever it gets passed in 2029. They will be monitoring councils in terms of the announced between 2% and 4% rates cap. And I think that we will probably get more input once the legislation is drafted and going through the parliamentary process. Happy to take any questions on what we've presented here.
How do you account for growth on, like, it's on a per capita basis, no? The rates?
Yep.
So is it on rating units or on population?
It's currently they're talking about residential rating units, which doesn't help if you have a large commercial, large industrial, a large elderly population who may be living in residential care, which has one rating unit, but 200 to 300 people. So as I say, these things haven't been defined yet, and we've talked a little bit about that. I guess the concept is, do we agree with the fact that we need rates capping? And if we do, then what I would suggest is we stay away from things like CPI. CPI is no relationship to council's costs. And in fact, some work's been done that the construction costs have deviated by 25% more than CPI. So as a minimum, CPI is granted, it's something that residents understand because that's what's measuring food prices, etc. But it has no relationship to construction costs. I remember 2 or 3 years ago when we had a bit of a petrol shock. Most water assets are petroleum based in terms of the PVC pipe, etc. And roading, we were facing 37% increases in costs relating to putting tar seal on the road. And that we were still running at a 3 to 5% CPI. So that doesn't make sense. We do talk about the measures being backward facing. We are supposed to be looking forward, but they're asking us at this point in time to use backward facing measures, which again doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Thank you. I really liked reading through your rates capping, through what came through, because it's in layman's term that anyone from our public can read and understand and see why something that is 2 to 4% might not be in their best interests or in their children and grandchildren's best interests. And I think for me, out of the whole submission, that sentence that you've just raised as the highlight is that this council said we wanted to be forward looking and we're being asked to do all of our planning and financing on backwards looking measures. And that is just not going to set us up for success.
There will be increased costs associated with this as well from our perspective, because one of the things that they do take into account is depreciation. We have a revaluation structure for our different classes of assets. So waters we revalue every year. Having said that, waters aren't included in this, they're out. And parks and reserves, we revalue every 5 years. Based on the revaluation we just did in 2025, the revaluation alone would have accounted for 4.1% rates increase. So we already breached the cap just on revaluations. So what that means is that we would need to start running revaluations more regularly. In fact, what I would suggest is you'd need to do them yearly to make sure that in future years, because you effectively get an accumulation of impact, you don't want that. You actually want to do it yearly. That leads me to issues, because we do it for our accounting side of things, we won't necessarily have that information in place for our long-term planning or our annual planning. So that happens after our balance date and after we've adopted our LTP. So all of that information and impact comes in potentially a year or two after it should. So there's always going to be a lag behind in relation to depreciation and revaluations. From our perspective, we're in a reasonably good position because we do fund depreciation. There will be councils who will be looking at that and saying, because we don't fund it, they don't fund depreciation, they are potentially going to be in a world of pain as they try to start up that. And if you've got a position where, you know, you've not funded depreciation, can't start it because you would always be in breach of the cap.
That's about what the government want, though, isn't it?
They want councils to be depreciating.
Yes, they do.
That is best practice, and that's being raised at the LGNZ level as well, because Paul raised it with me was how are you going to transition those councils who
Yeah.
currently don't have any depreciation?
Well, they don't do it
to a
again.
point?
They're one or the other, dead or depreciation. or both.
Yeah, I guess so. There's always a problem if you've got growth or you've got you're one of the councils who haven't been maintaining their assets as they should have over a long period of time. Because then you're starting to get into large drops of capital spend, large borrowings and lower repayments. Because you're not going to try and repay everything in one hit. The other issue with this is rates capping for us will reduce our ability to borrow. So for every $620,000 of increase in rates, which is 1% at the moment, we can borrow just under $2 million. So if we have a 5%, then we can borrow a smidge under 10, which is the kind of thing that we need to be looking at if we are going to be caught up outside of, for argument's sake, NZTA funding our bridge replacement. We don't. If we're having to stump up that money, that's not going to be helpful. It's going to create a bigger bow wave, which is what we're trying to avoid. And I think that's what most councils across the country are starting to realise, hence the larger rates increases to get them to the point where they're starting to be able to eliminate their bow wave. So there's a whole bunch of constraints that will come into play if this rates cap goes ahead.
Will they do a U-turn on the rate cap?
Election year.
And at the same time, there's more legislation coming. It's also out for submission that puts even more costs onto us with the emergency management amendment. That is another cost that will come to us. And after the weekend that we've just had, I would suggest that that kind of $80-odd million price tag over the 4 years is going to be substantially more as local councils are expected to the expectations of.
So what happens if
resilience
we
and
reach the rate cap?
They don't.
No, we haven't. As I say, this is the original consultation was around, here's the formula. This is here are the economic factors that we've proposed to use. What do you think of them? I think it's kind of watch this space come next week type of thing. Then DIA will collate all of this. And I think that's the reason for the very sharp turnaround. I think 4th of February, this is to be back. Then they will look at and say, yeah, okay, we can live with that or we can't. We need to develop the model. And then that will go in the legislation. We don't know who the regulator might be. We don't know how responsive the regulator could be if we need to breach the cap for the reasons that they may allow us to breach the cap. Given that we need to set rates on 1 July and we get one go at it, how does that fit in with our budgeting and our long-term planning, which we have to have ready to go by 30 June so we can adopt rates? And then we have to, it doesn't then become an amendment to a long-term plan or something. We have to go through that process to get an exemption from the rates cap. We just don't know any of that.
And it's the thing that really annoys me about this is that our residents will think that they are going to open a bill that is never more than 4%, and it's just not true. And an example from a couple of years ago in Australia where they've had rates capping for a long, long time, Strathfield applied to play catch up because they'd had 3% or less over a number of years to play catch up. They applied for and were approved a 92% rates increase over 3 years. And the government who sets the range said, yes, actually, you do need that to catch up, so you can have it. So all these people that thought they were only ever going to get 3 or 4% are now facing 35, followed by 13, followed by 17. And they've said, yes, actually, that is what needs to start. So that's the real challenge. That's where the devil's been hidden in the detail from our people. And the bill that they open is not going to be 3 or 4% forever.
Doesn't work. No, it doesn't work at all.
So we will move from what my understanding is, we'll also move from the average rates increase that we've always talked about, which is previous year's total rates, this year's total rates minus last year's total rates divided by last year's total rates gives you a percentage increase. If it's 4%, every rating factor within your rating, you're allowed to go up 4%. So the general rate, variable rate will go up 4%. The UAGC will go up 4%. That's how they will work it. It won't be
higher than that though, aren't we? Hopefully.
in terms of the percentage.
Our rate increases on the average.
I think in year 3, where we lose 3 waters,
Get down a bit.
take 3 waters out, I think we were at a 10% increase. And then we dropped down to kind of 2s and 3s and 4s. But, you know, we're going to be doing.
Borrowing for depreciation in it. We didn't put the borrowing for depreciation would stay up there.
That's right. Yeah.
And we want to be staying up there, don't we, on the average.
But that's gone though with 3 waters. That was a 3 waters issue. And that's the only reason we did it, because that was going to pass on to the group. So in terms of the percentages, people may, they'll get an increase in the rating factor of 4%, and then they're going to get potentially valuation changes will come through, and that will change how much they pay. So we may say 4%, they'll get a rates bill that may be more than 4% because their values have changed, and they'll look at it and say, you're not very transparent, council. You know, there'll be a whole world of pain.
Are you saying that the valuations will come in? I mean, the community will not have their valuations prior to.
Every 3 years they'll get new values.
Yeah.
And if let's assume that we picked 4% and we're allowed to do 4% per annum going forward.
Sorry,
so
like
every time a valuation changes,
it's more than 4%. Yeah.
it's going to.
Wow. Some people,
More than
4% on a new value.
because you might have another
Then
100K.
we're going to go into
some people have decreases.
yeah. We're going to go to rate review where that could all change. On top.
Yeah, look, I in terms of the rating review, I'm not sure that we should be worried yet about what the rates capping model looks like, because as I say, we're only dealing with a formula at the moment.
But if we do change the rating model, it might be more capital value.
Yep.
Then it will naturally look like we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, and it will look like we've been dishonest. And it'll feel like that when you open your rates demand.
Yeah, but you'll get that in play before the rates cap comes in. So you probably have a couple of years of this, and you will then have another. So what this will do is it'll come in 2029, just before a revaluation kicks in.
Mm-hmm.
So whether they're going to say, yeah, it starts on 2029, and then from rates from 1 July 2029, that's when the impact is, that's okay. But if they start saying you've got to deal with this and from 1 January 2029, and then we get a revaluation, that's going to be a problem as well. So this is kind of ready to go if you're happy with the
only other problem I'd say is, if the minister, you read his literature, he has an expectation that we reflect this on the 1st July 2026. Because but saying the language that's coming out that actually, you might not kick in 2029, we'll be looking at councils to say that you should be starting to conform to this policy. You might want to make a statement about that, because all councils are going to need time to just be unrealistic of.
Although for us, it is exactly the time that 3 waters go, so we get a big drop, 27% reduction. But the point, I take your point that we're dealing with other councils who may not be, who have kept 3 waters in-house, who are going to face a similar problem. So we can make a comment on that.
Tie that into some of the other submissions that we're making, in particular the complete overhaul of what everything local government looks like and how that might be paid for, because one of the indications was that needed to be provided for in existing budgets, which it is currently not. So if we start saying, oh, there's a 4% cap, but it doesn't include this, and it doesn't include this, and it doesn't include this, what's the point? But yeah, I think we do need to highlight that some of that reform project stuff from them is also going to need to be factored into those.
Yep, we can do that.
And how do we tell the public? We're talking about, how does the ratepayer meant to understand the massive changes that are coming down? Talk about transparency and talk about understanding and communication. It's a very hard thing to communicate.
I think this obviously kind of stems from a little bit the theme of the day being communication around a little bit. What's the percentage of people that get their rates billed by email now?
Oh, yeah, it's not significant.
But majority still get paper?
Yeah.
Okay, so I know this sounds like really a tiny thing. When you get your rates billed, I know you get your rates billed and sometimes there's another flyer that's stuck in the back. I'll put money on it that people pull their bill out and just bin, even though they should be reading it, they will just look at the bill and the rest is in there. You have to somehow attach it to the front. I know this sounds really tedious, but it has to be attached to the information needs to be attached to the front. So they have to open it up to look at their bill. I know that sounds ridiculous.
Also, we'll just point out that, even if 50% of our people got their bill by email instead of in the post 4 times a year at $3 a pop, we could start saving some serious money. So if you'd like your council to save money, please sign up to receive your rates notice via email.
The other thing that we have to be very cognizant of in terms of the communications around this, we do not want to have another previous government's Three Waters media campaign that slags off local councils when this is something that they've put in themselves. So we need to be able to tell the story, make sure that, if they're going to spin it about how bad councils are, we need to be able to counter that. I don't think the councils are necessarily that bad. Some have issues, but from a CODC perspective, we're not that bad. So I think that we need to make sure that we've got the comms right, that we can tell our story. And I think that's going back to what you were saying, Tracy.
Last week, I asked one of our MPs to point to just one thing in our district that was frivolous or a nice to have. And he smiled and said, well, you guys are actually doing quite well. And that's the challenge. Like the government kept pointing at us and saying, wasting money, frivolous, nice to have, stop it.
Yeah.
And as soon as we try and say, well, no, we're really not, here's our cost, we're just afraid as a pack of whingers that don't know what we're doing.
So if we put some words around the confliction with the current reform package and rates capping, do you want to have another look at this, or we can fire it past Tamer and you can say, yep, I'm okay with that, given that it's due next week?
I'm just wondering, really conscious, we just sent this out to you guys yesterday and some of you probably haven't had a chance with the meeting today to have a look at it. I'm wondering if we go ahead and do that. We'll give that to Tamer, but we give you guys under close of play Friday. Those that you haven't had a look, in case there's anything that you want us to emphasise, we can make any final amendments on Monday. Again, if there's any amendments, we'll go via Tamer. We can aim to get it away. Does that work?
That'd be good. Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Oh, thank you.
PCs, is it?
The fun keeps coming. Planning.
Please do.
Is there anything in the natural environment? Is that next?
No.
Have you got the, I sent through.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, so the RM reform was released, the two replacement pieces of legislation, the bills were released in December. Call for submissions was the 19th of December and they close on the 13th of February. So the intention is to enact these pieces of legislation by the middle of this year. So there's quite a bit of urgency. Listening to some of the other presentations today, there's a lot of crossover, which hasn't really been considered by the authors of the VET. So that's one of the things that we're going to be recommending in the end that we raise in our submission, is that there has to be a crossover there. For example, the costs of implementing this system over a very short period of time will have a significant impact on rates. So there's a whole load of things, but this slide, please. I'll take you through a little bit about the new system. So there's two pieces of legislation being released, the Natural Environment Act and the Planning Act. So that quite clear distinction in terms of roles and responsibilities. The Natural Environment Act is solely in the regional council sphere of, and they refer to the regional councils. So the regional council looks after everything natural environment, and district councils and city councils, we get the Planning Act. So that's everything urban and built. So we lose things like biodiversity and that sort of stuff. So that will sit squarely with the regional council going forward. So the first reading was on the 16th of December, and as I said, the submissions close on February the 13th. Next slide, please, Wayne. So this is the transition time. It's fast, really fast. So the timeline is basically three and a half to 6 years. So it's within, it'll have an impact on the 2027-37 LTP in terms of cost and implementation. It's moving really fast. We're waiting on a whole load of national direction that's yet to come. Got spatial plans to be delivered, regional spatial plans to be delivered by the end of 2027. And a 6 month space between when we actually get the national direction and delivering and notifying spatial plans. And then coming out of that is the land use plans and the other plans. Next slide, please. Wayne, next. Oh, yeah. So how it works is a hierarchy of instruments. So it's not unlike what we had under the Labor government. Little bit different, and it's very similar to the RMA, but there's quite a few differences in terms of how it's administered. So national policy direction, so we still haven't got it all to be released late 2026-27. And national standards, that's the central government's made a lot of comments about having standardised zones and things like that. So we don't know what that looks like. We've been working up until now with national planning standards that we've got when we've done plan changes. Hopefully it will be them again, but we're not sure yet. So we don't have any certainty around what that looks like. So the regional spatial plans, late 2027, and then land use plans and natural environment plans. Again, land use plans will be one for the whole of Otago. So the whole region will have one, and each council will literally kind of bolt in. So we'll have the way that it's designed is that, which is a little bit better than the last iteration, is that we will actually have an opportunity to be different to Waitaki or Queenstown, but we will be choosing from the same selection. We have the same options, but we can get to choose what that looks like. So that's that. Next slide, please. The key elements of the new system. There's a lot of top-down directives, a lot of ministerial step-in powers designed to ensure, well, the national priorities are met. Ministerial intervention is all the way through it, control and decision making, overriding if they don't like the outcomes. Regional spatial plans developed by committees, formed by local authorities, which is a good thing, and they'd have a secretariat, which is what was there before. The minister can also appoint somebody, and if this the minister also gets to have say, and so they also get a veto power if there's a disagreement. The minister's decision stands. Land use and natural environment plans replace district and regional plans guided by the national direction. So for us, it'll be land use plans. Said that about bolting in. Next Next slide, please. There's a new planning tribunal to be established to review administrative decision and resolve issues quickly. So that would be, for example, if the decision on notification, then that would go to the planning tribunal. Environment Court on notified, there's regional councils, they're going to be called permits going forward, and consents. So they're called still on there. Regulatory relief positions, this is a big one. So this is effectively for outstanding natural landscapes or heritage matters. If we put in the new plans, if we put notations on people's properties, firstly, we're required to come up with a regime to compensate those people, and that will come out of ratepayer funds. So we will have to compensate people for having outstanding natural landscapes or heritage notations on their properties.
So they all by default go, and if you want to reinstate them, you. So
my reading of it is it's a clean slate. So we're coming in with new pieces of. So if we want to, as it's currently drafted, we have to have a mechanism for compensating them. It could be rates relief. It could be, but we have to have if they are not, and the wording is really grey and woolly. The wording talks about if the rule in the plan has a significant impact on the reasonable use of land. And Susan Grayson did a presentation. It's pretty much a lawyer's dream.
Oh my God.
So it's pretty grey, and yeah.
we have a significant amount of in our
Yeah, we do.
SNL now.
We've got a significant amount of heritage. We've got 5 heritage precincts. And it's kind of, I mean, it's always been considered as part of the fabric of who we are. When Christian, the minister, suggested that because we're not going to be processing as many resource consents, we could use that money to compensate people. But we cost recover a resource consent processing. So if we don't process them, there is no money. In fact, there is no profit in consent processing.
So what?
So the thing that's caused concern for a number of councils, obviously, we've got those areas, but other councils have raised their specific ones. So we should put it in.
So the recommendation that we would suggest is that it be removed altogether. And that's Taitora's recommendation as well.
If that's
It's just unworkable.
yeah,
With
if
the
that stays,
rates cap and all of that other stuff happening, it's just not workable.
if that stays, if that was to stay, despite most all
Yeah.
councils doing that, has Labor indicated? Well, Labor gets in, but has Labor indicated they would make any changes to this? Significant changes?
Any public. And yet, so that is a significant one for us when in the context of all of the things that we've been discussing this afternoon is and it's either that or we the option is to protect those things that are part of who we are, and it's probably not an option for us. That is part of who we are. So, and what is significant impact on the reasonable use of land? What is reasonable use of land? And what is a significant impact? And there's a lot of grey language like that all the way through it. So that will be, I would suggest, one of the main things we'll put.
How would this impact on any plan changes that are in process at the moment?
We're not allowed to process plan changes at the moment. So they've stopped us doing it. So we're not allowed to process any plan changes till December 2027, other than property plan changes. So we've been stopped altogether from doing anything till then. We have one plan change in process that will be heard in hopefully March, which is industrial in Clyde. And we have another one coming in for Cromwell, a private plan change. As long as we don't adopt it, because we're not trustworthy, then we can process a private application.
But there's one or two appeals, aren't there, still pending on plan change 19, for example?
There's one.
That's one, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's stopped, has it?
No, that's through the process. So that was past decision. So that was able to continue.
That's okay.
But anything that hadn't got a decision or a hearing You had to apply to the minister to be able to continue with it. I think Waitaki had some wins, but not a full win, if I recall right, on my plan. So the regulatory relief, President, is a big one. Mandatory delegation of decision making on notified resource consent. So they have to be heard by external independent commissioners. They can't be heard by councillors. And limits on who can submit on notified consents is the other thing that kind of jumps out at us. Next page, please.
Of course, on that, it will increase the cost for any.
Yep. Yeah.
Which people then will be angry about in the same way.
So we've submitted, I prepared the submission we did in 2022. So it is the submission that we're pulling together at the moment will be very similar thing, trying to maintain that local voice, which has always been really important to Central Otago, is maintaining the local voice where we can, but making sure that we're not, that we're still got a workable system. So the first, I've put some bullet points on here just about things that I think we'll focus in on, or what I'm suggesting that we focus in on. One is coordination and consideration with other legislative changes. Just sitting here this afternoon thinking about the costs. This could, you know, for example, implementing all of this, developing spatial plans, developing new plans, all of that could have a significant impact on rates because we have to deliver that within a very short period of time. So that alone could be 1 to 2% on rates. So delivering some of this stuff is
timeline. We'll need to build this into the LTP.
yeah.
Before you even have not even resourcing. I mean, it's well and good. You've still got BAU, which is you guys are busy enough.
Yeah. So one of the things they are doing is they're removing controlled and non-complying activities. So that just means you're kind of in that kind of middle ground most of the time. And you can't. There's a whole lot of things about what you can and can't consent and stuff. So like that's kind of rats and mice almost. Like the big issues is this kind of wider system change is the big issue, and whether or not the ratepayer can afford to even do stuff, you know. So and the other one, achievability of timeframes I put in there, it is too tight. It's far too tight. We haven't, as I said at the start, we haven't got the national direction, we haven't got the national standards, and they are going to be released at best 6 months before the spatial plan is due. It's just not, it's too fast, it's far too fast. And then delivering it within the time frame is, it's just not, I don't even know how workable it is. So I've put in there clarifying when we're going to get that, because they sort of say start of 26, mid, you know, that kind of thing. We're getting that kind of range. We don't even know really exactly what we're getting, like, but, you know, even to understand what it might look like. Implementation costs, which I talked about there briefly, that'll have an impact on 27-37 GP. Because there is going to be some implementation costs. One thing we do support, I think we support, is having our own section in the plans, in the regional plans, like, because previously it was a little bit different, and removing the regulatory relief provisions altogether, and removing ministerial decision making and oversight other than in setting those national standards. Like, basically let us do our job, you know, like let us do that. There's a lot of ability to override or, you know, intervene, appoint people if he doesn't like, if he or she doesn't like what's going on and things like that. So there's a lot, and I don't even know how in a time we were talking about fast track everywhere and fast track everything, I don't even know how workable that is if the minister has those kinds of controls on anyway. So, and the transition is minimising the transitional rules. We're either on one camp or the other. It's having kind of the transition between the RMA and that. So keep them to an absolute minimum of when we're in and when we're out. What else have we got in here? And one other thing that just occurred to me while I was sitting there was just around the sub-regional plans. You know, that we're busy working with Queenstown on our regional deal stuff. And it's where they all fit into this thing. And I'm assuming that we will be able to do that. But, you know, Yeah. That's what we're thinking in terms of the theme. I'm sorry that we don't have the submission yet. It's tight. It is significant, and we will get the opportunity to speak to the select committee, so we will always ask to do that. And yeah, because it will become legislation. There is no second bite at this. This is. But we do have the benefit of Tapura. They always put together a pretty good submission. It's always helpful. It was helpful last time as well. They did exactly the same for us. So it does help reduce the amount of training we have to do because there's a lot of material out there.
You don't have much else on at the moment.
Well, I did write pragmatism in terms of the submission process and how you'd like it to be represented and your voices represented. Timeframe is tight, obviously, and done a brilliant job even compiling this, even realising the other resources, but Fast Track is here for us, and we have been concerned with that the last week or so, and even some of you are aware that we had involved is currently unavailable. So Anne's also been assisting in that regard. So in terms of the flavour of the submission and how you'd like us to respond, we did wonder whether in terms of tight timeframes, whether we could do a submission and Peter had the to sign off on it, or in terms of how we view it in advance, or are you happy with the themes that are being pulled out? We're shifting to Australia.
Your passport's being revoked, Cheryl, and you can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
You can't.
Would you impose some of those like owing out? Would you envisage you just go back and put them back on? Would they ever be removed?
Removed.
Yeah.
In terms of the compensation.
I think anything we've got at the moment, if we were going to be forced into a new plan.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
If we were going to do a new plan, it depends because we haven't got much lead-in time. We wouldn't do, for example, we started that with the rural community last year. We wouldn't have time to complete that, and part of that would have been looking at stuff like that.
Yeah.
So in an ideal world, yes, but maybe not, because we won't have the timeline they've set for us. It's going to be bang, 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 bang. We're not going to have the luxury of reviewing. There are no analysis except it is appropriate or not.
Yes, so status quo would have.
Most likely, yeah, most likely. Yeah, I think that there will be a submission period, I'm assuming. Yeah, so, yeah. I'm clear at the moment, so. So the submissions close on the 13th of February. Circulate. We tend to, if we're going to speak to the select committee, we tend to put sufficient detail and to kind of open the door and enable a discussion with the panel. Yeah, enough in there, so it won't be greatly detailed. So you don't go through line by line and say we want. We don't do that.
To join you with the select committee, so whatever is put forward, but yeah, maybe if you send it to me and then I can circulate it with the team, and if there's any issues.
We'll try to give you as much time as we can. I could circulate the one we did last time if that's helpful. It is similar in the vein about maintaining that local make decisions.
Just the one that you're going to do. Just the one you're going to do. There's going to be
enough
reading, so I don't know if we want to read an old one, even if it has got the same flavour.
We work through the other submissions as well, joining those dots up about the amount of change we've got coming in the next 2 or 3 years, and how much impact that's going to have, you know, the rates and all of the other stuff that's. I think so. Makes sense. It will be. Thank you very much.
And continuing in the vein of everything everywhere all at once, I believe we've got one more.
Yeah, and this can be super quick if you need this to stay here. So, Julie's largely leading this piece. Julie is on leave, this week, next week. But just in terms of this, is probably more technical bill than some of the other ones that are out at the moment. So I've been drafting about some of our points to add Julie's relation as well. But the shift from development contributions to development levies, we just want to ensure that it's financially robust, practical to run, and that growth pays for growth. So minimising under recovery, gaming of DCs, which can potentially happen. There's some technical parts of the bill around units of demand and the current drafting related to granular to expand on as part of that assessment, and around interest indexation, borrowing costs included in that, and allow for reassessment of levies, because as we see now, some developments don't come online for a number of years, and us by the time we get to building that infrastructure, costs have increased. So it's the ensuring that we are getting more need for that infrastructure. It also has it's around admin charges, so supporting the actual calculation of levies and different things. Support. So in principle, we largely support what is being put forward. However, as it currently stands, they're missing a little bit of the technical around how it will actually be calculated. We'll be noting in submission, and only other. Sorry, that was largely and around supporting that 3-year phase transition to align to LTP cycle, because that is currently pointed after the 27 LTP. So just trying to get it aligned to LTP cycles.
Dylan, don't want you to miss out. If you can highlight reel.
Yeah, so this isn't officially part of the program. It's only been a bit of a last minute one that we've looked at, but it's the emergency management bill. So that submission is actually due next week. It's being led by the sector, so emergency management practitioners. So the group managers from across the country have prepared their own submission. I've reviewed it. I know Tamer and Peter have also looked at it, and the KEG group will be looking at it this Friday to ensure that it meets the requirements of the wider region. We are still undecided as to whether or not CODC will put in a CODC specific submission, or it will align just simply for submission. But we'll update you on that. We have got some notes specific to CODC. They aren't that different. They are around unfunded mandates, the extra responsibility and liability that sits with TAs, that there is no additional support, and all of those other challenges.
Very much. Lou, did you have anything that's being reformed that you'd like to share?
What's come on the email today?
No, the only thing that's coming up is those KiwiSaver contributions. So,
oh yes,
yeah.
Yep.
It's something, but not.
Perfect. Right. Oh, there's nothing on there. We were just hearing about it. We don't need to note them. Let's note that we've had a discussion about the current reform.
Yeah.
And multiple cerebral. Ready to move that? Can someone second it, please? Thank you, Sarah. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Right, key risk report. Welcome back, Amelia. I'll try to keep this quick, as I know you're slightly behind. So this is the key risk report from December. So there has been no change since this was last reported to you. Currently, we've got 2 very high risks, 4 high, 10 medium, and 2 low, and no very low risks. Good, because they probably wouldn't belong on this register. They're very low. The next update to audit and risk is the week after next. So a pretty quick turnaround, which means there's not been too much movement in those risks. But that means you will get a new report in the February meeting. So that will include a deep dive as well. That's on the Cromwell Hall this quarter. So any questions?
Not a hall. Can't call it a hall.
The facility by the lake. Facility by the lake.
Facility.
Slash river.
It's on a hall, it's not a hall.
It's just a quick one. Why, okay, there's been no change. But if you're looking at from a risk perspective, we want risk to be going down.
That's a risk in itself that it's not changing.
Yeah.
Essentially.
It's like a policy for a policy, isn't it?
Isn't it? Yeah.
Well,
Yes. So
Some of them I know kind of remain because of.
exactly. There are
Stagnation and risks.
there are some which are the climate change one is a perfect example of one that is highly unlikely to ever drop. But there are some that we are seeing move down. So the one movement, spoiler alert for audit and risk, is that the facility by the lake operational readiness risk has reduced this quarter. So we have seen a reduction there, which is great. And we do have lots in the pipeline that we expect this year will bring down a couple of those asset related risks as well. So hopefully we will see that reduction. Although, as you've just heard from all the submissions, there may be some increases in
yeah, I
that.
was going to say, you're right.
So yeah, we don't expect it to be static as a whole. We do expect to see movement in that. As into the nature of the work we undertake does carry risk that will never be fully removed.
You don't get back.
Absolutely, unfortunately.
Oh, yeah. Good news bear today, eh? At least you deliver.
Keeps me in a job, Sarah.
Munchausen's on behalf of the fire organisation. We enjoy having you here.
So the recommendation is that the report be received and its contents noted, and nobody even got the spoiler alert, so thank you, Tracy, and seconded Cheryl. All those in favour? Against? Carries. Thank you very much.
We enjoyed the smiley. Stay.
From page 63 is my year's report, and I know you will have all read it. Even though it was probably not quite as exciting as our ED strategy, was it, Will? So I'll take that as read. Thanks so much for the feedback. Does anybody have any questions? In which case I'll move that my incredibly mediocre report be received and made the Bob will second it.
He's not gonna.
No, he doesn't want to. Tracy, will you please? All those in favour? Against? Carried. The governance report begins on page 65. Status reports. There was, of course, the Uhuru Otago Museum regular report. It's because we left them some money, so they report back to us, which is quite nice. There was status reports there. Did anybody have any comments on any of those? Go across in your other. Just put up.
Could we have one more little line? Like, one little more box that has the page number for that? Because sometimes when you're flicking, you've got to go back to page number one. Yeah, just so you got page number for the agenda and page number for the attachments.
Please, mistakes. I wasn't going to remote.
It's very pedantic, but it is really handy to.
Perfect. So nothing else to raise on the status reports? In which case, I'm happy to move that the report be received and its contents noted. Seconded. Thank you, Bob. All those in favour? Again, carried. Community board and committee minutes from page 66, which. Yeah, it's only audit and risk, yeah. And they are the unconfirmed minutes. Is someone happy to move those, please? Thank you, Tracy. Seconded. Thank you, Sarah. All those in favour? Aye, against, carried. Date of the next meeting is the 25th of February, 2026 in Cromwell. And Deputy Mayor Tracy Patterson.
Sorry.
Apologies, complaints, queries, lunch orders to Tracy, please.
Lunch.
She's quite a good cook. You could.
You're gonna grab the KFC on the way through, are you?
Get to, I got driving someone the other day for something, take out the big guns, the raspberry and white chocolate slice, so they were happy with that. So if you count your lucky stars, I might bring some sliced.
Right.
This one.
We are now moving into public excluded for the reasons outlined on page 73. I have got a part B to that. That Mr. Peter Cook and Mr. Damien Spring from Santana Minerals be permitted to remain at this meeting after the public has been excluded because of their knowledge of the access agreement being discussed. Can I have a mover? Thank you, Sarah, and a seconder. Thank you, Stu. All those in favour? Aye, against. We will take a short break for 5 minutes and be back.
I'll have the break.
Yeah.
Instead of having that.
I turned it up.
Again.
I'd start.